This is HCAM TV.
Through the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
Thank you, Bob. I will call this meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, this is Brendan Tedstone, Select Board Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Irfan Nasrullah.
Here.
Brian Hurt.
Here.
Mary Jo Lafreniere.
Here.
Me Ritterbush.
Here.
When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Norman Kamalu.
Here.
Elaine Lazarus.
Here.
Additional speakers may tonight include Josh Grossetti, Dave Del Torio, Carol Kavanaugh, Susan Rothermich, Jane Moran, and Peter Lagoy. If there's anyone attending who would like to speak during public forum of the agenda, you must notify the meeting host in advance. You may do this by using the raise hand feature of Zoom. I'm sorry for my dog whining in the background. We'll take care of that in just a moment. This open meeting of the Hopkins Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we're complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening by video conference via Zoom webinar as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We are now turning to the first agenda item. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For the public forum portions of the agenda, the chair will work with the meeting host to call on each pre-registered speaker to make their comment. Each speaker must begin by identifying their name and address. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes for their comments. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom now to indicate you'd like to make a comment. So we do not have executive session tonight. So as soon as I'm done here, if there are no hands up for public forum, public comment, we will move on. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Pledge of Allegiance. Let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Again. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak? If so, they should have used their raise hand button by now. Seeing none, we will move on. Consent agenda. The board will consider approving the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You may, Mr. Kwala.
We have Sean McAuliffe. Here's a very quick update for the board and the community.
Okay. Sean? We can go ahead and, Ben, if you can liven Sean's mic up, appreciate it.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak.
Sure.
So I'd like to update the Select Board this evening on the roles and responsibilities of the Health Department and the School Department as it relates to following individuals with COVID-19 exposure. I'm concerned that there's been a misunderstanding, and I'm hoping that we can clarify our roles so that we do not misrepresent the facts. There's a clear delineation of responsibilities between the Health Department and the School Department. The Health Department is responsible for monitoring the public health of all residents and working with the school to support their COVID-19 responsibilities. The school's responsibilities are documented in the Department of Early and Secondary Education's July 17, 2020 protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios in school, on the bus, or in the community or in community settings. The document was revised on December 16th, 2020. This document clearly states that the school district is responsible for case identification, the communication of quarantine and isolation guidelines, the identification of close contacts, and all other relevant communications to the individual parties and the school community. Like with all other communicable and/or infectious diseases, the school district must report and their findings to the local Board of Health. The local Board of Health supports and will continue to support the Hopkinton School District with their duties. We work collaboratively with the students, or we work collaboratively with the schools to monitor and track family members who do not attend the schools. Students and teachers are the responsibility of the school district. The health department will continue to assist the district with their reopening planning while performing case management outside of the school, operating vaccine clinics, and continuing to perform the non-COVID duties under our jurisdiction. That said, are there any questions? There's just been some communication out there that we just want to. Okay.
So thank you, Sean. Actually, when you're in public comment, we don't allow back and forth.
Okay.
So you are fortunately off the hook. There are no questions or comments for you from the board or for any of the people watching. So thank you for your update. We appreciate that. That is not my choice. That is a procedural rule. So thank you for the update. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, turning to the consent agenda. The board will consider approving the consent agenda, considering the approval of the minutes for the select board meeting on February 23, appointing Mohammed Haider to the Capital Improvement Committee to a term expiring June 30, 23, and appointing Sharon O'Reilly to the Woodville Historic District Commission Board of Realtors representative to a term expiring June 30, 23. Board members, anything to break out on that? Hearing none, I will request a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. How do you vote? Mr. Nasrullah?
Surely, yes.
Mr. Herr?
Yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Lafreniere, yes.
Ritterbusch?
Ritterbusch, yes.
Stone, yes. Capital budget hearings. Tonight, the board will continue with its meetings with town departments to hear about their operating budget and capital requests. We will be hearing from the technology, engineering facilities, schools, Upper Charles Trail Committee, and the Trail Coordination and Management Committee. Mr. Kamala, if you would.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I call upon Josh Grossetti, the IT Director, to present the IT FY22 budget.
As the IT Director, I would assume he will have one pretty fancy Zoom background superimposed. Something of a Star Wars theme.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. This is Josh Grossetti, Director of IT for the town. The Hopkinton IT department is charged with developing the global IT vision for the town. This includes planning, budgeting, implementation, and the day-to-day management and support of all information technology infrastructure and staff. The IT department supports all technology platforms and systems for the town hall, police, fire, Department of Public Works, Parks and Recreation, Library, and the Senior Center. We support the use of technology to advance the town's goals: communication, transparency, efficiency, and service. Currently, and since April of 2020, the IT department is staffed by 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. We have recently hosted 3 interns, allowing local high school and college students the ability to gain hands-on experience in a professional IT department setting. We do also collaborate with our colleagues at the Hopkinton Public Schools on a number of shared projects and infrastructure. We support over 200 employees, as well as additional boards and committee members. We support just shy of 700 devices and literally hundreds of different applications or software packages provided by over 100 unique vendors. We respond to an average of more than 70 support requests on a monthly basis. And this is in addition to the project work and the ongoing care and feeding of systems and infrastructure. The town manager's recommended budget under the 2.5% version shows an increase in IT personnel services of $46,572. This is due to hiring of a full-time seat that has remained vacant for over 11 months at a rate that is in line with market conditions, as well as changing a part-time seat to full-time. The expense budget shows an increase in IT operating costs of $92,316. In many line items, we are seeing a decrease in costs due to smart cost containment and renegotiated terms with existing vendors. Telephony, voice, and internet costs are projected to increase by 3.5%. The other primary cost drivers for the increase are all in the technology service arena and can be attributed to the following: support contract for new public safety computer-aided dispatch and records management system, additional platform licensing for continued use of GIS, expanded third-party transparency tools, and moving more departments towards an e-permitting solution. Happy to answer any questions about operating at this time.
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Nasrullah. Actually, you know what? When we go through these, I'm not going to go person by person. If somebody has something to add as the board, we can just kind of go freestyle. So if anyone has any questions for Josh, by all means, jump in.
I had a question about, we had approved an IT specialist position, we're lifting the hiring freeze for that. Did that ever get filled? That is.
We are in the process of filling that now.
Okay.
Yes. And that's the vacant position that I referenced.
Okay, great. But not.
We're on the 2-yard line.
Meaning you get 2 to go or 98 to go?
two to go.
All right, good. Looks like we're all set. Josh, thanks for your presentation. We approve. We don't approve. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do also have one capital item. Should that be covered now as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. Your time is up.
No, that's fine.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead and present that.
We have one capital item from the IT department supported by the town manager. And this is a carry forward from last year that was originally proposed in fiscal 21. And this is in the amount of $34,931 to replace a number of exterior cameras and upgrades at the fire and police departments.
Board, anyone?
We're upgrading the cameras, or, I mean, there's already some there, or are we installing new ones?
Yep, no, that's fine. Great question. Yeah, both of those buildings do already have a number of cameras that were added in recent times. These 4 that are part of this capital line would be to replace the 4 most legacy security cameras. These are a couple of cameras that were installed when the buildings were first put up, and so are older and in need of replacement. Once these 4 are replaced, all of the cameras at both public safety buildings will be contemporary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Mr. Kamalu.
Dave Del Torio, Town Engineer, Facilities Coordinator is next.
One of the most popular people to walk, if you were to walk down the center of town right now.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry about that. Having spotty connection. Quick. Very similar to the IT department, the facilities department here. We support all the other town departments with any renovation, with capital projects, day-to-day operations. So we touch all the buildings and all the departments. In addition to departmental projects and capital projects, overall projects. There's a town engineer. We support the Main Street project, as well as all the other, asset management goals for the town. Currently, we monitor 15 buildings in town. It's about 213,000 square feet of building space we manage on a day-to-day basis. We have 1 full-time regular shift custodian, 1 second shift custodian. We have a designated part-time 10-hour position that covers the senior center. And then in addition to those 2.25 employees, we have myself and a facilities manager. The square foot cost that we have, it's about 58 cents per square foot for custodial services. We've been reducing that number. I think this is the 3rd or 4th or 5th year in a row, which we were able to do mostly through efficiencies that we're finding with annual contracts, as well as we keep switching over some of our service maintenance companies and vendors, as well as working with all the different departments. I think we have it's a great group of department heads. So it's really easy to work with all the different departments. This year, my budget again for the level service, it's an increase of about 0.9% this year. One of the big changes this year is we had taken on, the town has purchased Walcott Street for the Park and Recs department. They moved in this year. That saves us the lease cost at 85 Main Street. This year, my budget includes, minimal increases for, utilities, mainly for the Walcott Street site building, as well as the Woodville Fire Station, which now is being manned full-time through the pandemic. And, in discussions with the fire chief, they're going to continue that service through fiscal year 22. So overall, it's we also signed a couple new energy contracts with solar companies for the library. So we realized some savings, a 10% savings, or actually 15% savings on the library. So overall, we'll be able to keep the increase down to 0.9% this year, and that does include a new cost for COVID-related expenses for facilities in the amount of $20,000. So we'll be able to continue to go over and above the minimum requirements for the COVID PPE and air purifiers and anything else new that comes down the line. We'll be able to support to keep the public and the employees safe and the best environment possible.
Is that it?
That's it. If
Thanks,
you-
Dave.
I can try to
Uh,
keep it.
Board members, anything for Mr. Del Torrio? Looks like you're getting off easy. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate
I had
it.
a couple capital articles.
Okay.
We have a police station replacing the shingles. It's a $250,000 item. It was something I think we pushed off from last fiscal year. It's just a replacement project of the shingles. We have a price from an architectural firm. So in addition to a cost from the manufacturer of the solar panels, their contract for those panels requires them to take those off and store them. So we're pretty confident in that cost moving forward. We have in coordination with the Parks and Rec Department, there's a drainage improvement project for the EMC Park in coordination with their, skate park project. Tried to separate these two projects because the drainage improvements for the EMC Park, even as is, requires improvements in order to not impact downstream abutters from some drainage and runoff issues. We have, the center school, we're moving forward with, this project is still in flux and it's still being studied by the Permanent Building Committee. I think we've settled on, originally the ask was for about 20 million. We were able to bring it back down to about 375,000. Thinking we're going to do a schematic design. But, we think the best way to proceed was to provide as much support, financial and development options as possible. So I think moving forward, we were going to be asking for $50,000 to develop an RFP so that we will get some real costs and real developer input onto the site, as well as a market and financial analysis on the town renting out and leasing out spaces that we do. So that we could create on that site. It'll give the town some realistic numbers to go by moving forward. And then there was a center school or a long-term storage for town files. Currently, they're at center school. With the state of the center school and the heating systems, we may be moving forward with looking for a longer term or a shorter term, however you want to look at it, solution for storing town files. Without any heat over there next winter, it's a hard ask to use that space for file storage. So we may be looking for costs as a capital article to find some space locally, as we did when Town Hall water damage project. We had to move all the files out of Town Hall and store them in a heated space. And that's
That it?
all I have. Yep.
I got a couple questions for you, Dave. On the police station roof shingling job, have you looked into metal roofing in comparison to the asphalt roofing? Only because metal seems to be something that lasts forever, whereas if it costs us a little bit more to do the metal now versus asphalt, where we do it for 250,000 now, and then in 15 years do it for another 250. And have we looked into the metal versus the pros and cons of metal versus asphalt?
Honestly, no, I have not. It was more of a we kind of going to replace in kind.
Yep.
It might be something I probably should look into.
Yep. I only say that I have a place up in Maine, and everywhere is metal roofing. I know they make the metal roofing to look like shingles, and doesn't have to be just the cabin style metal roofing, but just lasts forever. There's no maintenance, there's no ice dams. The sun hits it, warms it up, melts everything, flies right off. So
Thank you for the input. It's crazy hectic. So
Yep.
Any input is always appreciated.
Yeah, I would just float it out to them if you want, and don't if you don't. I'm just, as a nurse, I don't know a lot about roofing, so.
No. that's fine.
Second thing is the document storage. If your documents are at center school and they're in a room with no heat and there's no water in the building, what would be the rationale? Are they paper documents that we're talking about, or are they CDs or, electronic documents that need to be climate controlled?
Yeah, there wouldn't be anything in there that would be damaged by cold. I think it's more of a, it does still act as a working environment when staff need to go over there. When it's, 3 degrees outside, the building might really get down to 20, 30 degrees realistic if we don't turn the heat on. It just seems like it would be a hard ask from a facilities director to ask people to work in that environment.
When you say they work in the environment, would they spend 8 hours a day in there, or 4 hours a day, or are they just going in to get a plan from 49 Chamberlain Street?
I'm not sure how long. They certainly don't spend 8 hours in there, I don't believe, but just trying to make it as comfortable as possible for staff. It's my job.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. I'm all set. Board members, anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so on the center school, Dave, is it fair to say that $50,000 request is simply to get an RFP together for some kind of feasibility study as to what we might be able to do there, not only as a town, but perhaps, in partnership with the private developer in some fashion? Or is that $50,000 to design the use that the town's going to look at for town-only monies to be spent?
Yeah, I think it would be more focused on an RFP, focused on getting actual developers to respond, and to have them be able to, come up with the different scenarios for what the town would like to see there. And that's kind of what the PBC has the Permanent Building Committee has reviewed and developed, several different options that could be, including housing and a cultural, a community center, town and school space, storage space. The idea of the RFP would be to present those options to a developer, and have them actually come to the town and in coordination with the town, come up with realistic possibilities for what from a developer standpoint. In addition, we would really look at, which we haven't done, down to the hourly rates of new staff that would be needed. If we do build a community center there, we would do a market analysis, like a financial market analysis, down to, what types and how many programs. And obviously we work with park and recreations. The town could really, get out of a use, and, you get a gross income compared to a net income to see if you could really have a money generating site by leasing out spaces and renting spaces, and how many programs you could have there.
Yeah,
It's
I
all
think-
intended to give the residents and all the boards and yourselves as much information that we can before really asking folks, do you want to spend 10, 15, $20 million on this site?
So just to be clear, the select board, town meeting, and the community as a whole has not made a decision as to the sort of disposition of the center school. We haven't decided to sell it. We haven't decided to keep it. We haven't decided to build it. We haven't decided anything yet, but we're looking at this $50,000 to help us get some more facts about what the opportunities and possibilities could be without making any decisions. Because I can hear some folks now saying, what are you spending 50 grand on center school for? Talking to developers. We're not selling that building. So they're right, because that's where we are today. We haven't made that decision yet. I just want to be clear about that. And obviously, whenever we put that RFP together, protecting the front building in its current form, and rehabbing the inside obviously would be a big piece of the puzzle too. But I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
So to Mr. Hirsch's point, would you think the permanent building committee would be able to come present to us, maybe a little closer to town meeting, to give us an update? That might be helpful.
Absolutely.
And I think that CPC was working with them on the restoring the windows. I don't know if that made it to the town meeting warrant or not, but
I'll have to follow up. I'm not sure it was being moved forward.
okay.
I was still waiting for one more price from a historical architectural firm for a certain type of window option.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Del Torio.
Thank you.
Mr. Kamalu.
Through the chair, next is Dr. Carol Kavanaugh and Susan Rothermick to present the school department's FY22 budget request.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
Thank
I
you for
believe
being
Mrs.
here.
Rothermick is here as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
believe- Oh, I believe Mrs. Rothermick is here as well.
Yes, thank you.
There you are. All right, I think that before we get started, we did send some slides along earlier today. So I don't know if they can be projected and we can just kind of go through them quickly.
Surely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Oh, there we go. All right, so we have taken our sort of traditional FY22 budget and we've condensed it just a little bit so that you can kind of see the bigger pieces of our presentation tonight. We started with looking at our budgetary needs, as we always do, and our process begins as early as September. Our budget meetings were conducted with all stakeholders in the Hopkinton Public Schools. So that means all of our department directors, technology, our assistant superintendent, special education, building and grounds, for example, and our curriculum leaders, as well as our building principals. And as we looked at our needs, we had goals in mind, and among those are to maintain our exceptional academic and extracurricular programs, to be able to offer curriculum and instruction that meets the needs of all learners. And you know that the children who attend the Hopkinton Public Schools are kids who present themselves with very different needs every single day. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is our ability to meet those needs. We were looking to add teachers and support staff to accommodate any increases in our student population. And we don't really know what our growth will look like over the summer months. So we may be looking at more personnel in September. So we are also looking at the resulting growth impacts on all of our departments. Sometimes we have children who come into our schools and that means we hire more teachers, but eventually that means that you might need more HR people, for example, or more technology staff to accommodate the technology needs. So we took that into consideration. We are focusing on our student needs, not just academic, but also social emotional. And of course, we always support our school improvement plans. Next slide. Our big rock, I think, the one thing that we have grave concerns about is increased enrollment. We are really not sure how many students might end up on the doorstep of the Hopkinton Public Schools, but they are all our students and we find it very important to educate them. Next slide, please. So if you take a look at the slide that Ben is projecting right now, we actually right now have fewer students than was projected for this year. We anticipated that by the end of this school year, so June of 2021, we would have 4,111 students in the Hopkinton Public Schools. Our count as of today is 3,950. So you might be looking and thinking, oh, that's great, they've actually declined in enrollment, but that's not accurate. We have 161 students fewer than we anticipated we would, but our net gain at this point in the year is still 81 students. Next slide, please. And so when we take a look at where our students might be, different from other years, and I think to a great extent, the pandemic might be influencing the fact that we haven't met that other 161, and maybe we wouldn't have gotten that high, but we do need to note that in October of 2019, when we looked at our SIMS report, 97 students had withdrawn from the Hopkinton Public Schools. This year in 2020, we had lost 159 students. So we had 62 students leave us this year, more than last year. And that typically we were losing about that 100 students. So to lose 159 was to lose a lot of them. And we do ask families where the kids are going when they withdraw them from schools. And this year, 20 students were leaving to go to homeschooling. 48 were leaving to go to a private school within the state of Massachusetts, and 50 were leaving us to go to a private school or a public school outside of Massachusetts. Now, I'm not too worried about public schools because that would typically mean our students had moved. But if we have kids who have left us to go to a private school outside of Massachusetts, it could be that those are students who are just attending a school in New Hampshire or Rhode Island or Connecticut, and they may come back when the pandemic has passed. If you take a look at our 2019 enrollment in homeschooling, we had 18 students who were enrolled as homeschoolers then, and this year we have 34. So again, a difference of 16 kids. If we just take the 62 and the 16 and imagine that some of those kids are coming back to us, we anticipate that there may be very high enrollment over the summer. Another thing that has happened is that we thought we were going to have a much larger kindergarten class this year than we do. But one of our concerns might be that families decided to keep their kids out of kindergarten. And that is kind of coming to fruition a little bit just in our very early numbers. What we've been looking at is the number of children who have enrolled already in kindergarten for the upcoming school year. I think our enrollment has been open less than 2 weeks, and we already have just under 100 students enrolled. That's very unusual enrollment pace for us. I mean, it just could mean that people are very aware of what they need to do this year, more so than in past years. But it feels to us as if the floodgates are kind of open. And of course, we welcome all of our new kindergarten students, but there just seems like there are quite a few of them. Next slide, please, Ben. So if we just kind of globally take a look at what our approach was, we built this budget on the kids who are here now. So we are worried about increased enrollment, and we really have not planned for that. What we have planned for is the students who are here in front of us today. And so if we do, in fact, see a spike in enrollment in the fall of 21, we are going to need to revisit our personnel requests in this budget. New slide, please. One of the ways I like to look at student enrollment and our need to hire teachers is to do this. Every time you have a group of 20 students, typically we have to hire about 1.4 teachers on average. And so the projection from Dr. Wagman for next year is that we would be taking on 74 students. So if we rounded that up to 80 students, just so we could keep them in nice 20 student increments, we would really have 4 groups of 20 students. And those 4 groups, if we take them and we multiply them by the guesstimate of 1.4 teachers on average, what we're looking at is 5.6 FTEs or 5.6 additional teachers that we haven't accounted for. Again, we were very conservative, and we're hoping that we are not sort of inundated with students over the summer, but it very well could happen. And so what if we have that situation? One of the things that we're looking at is using some of our legacy farms money, and we have that as an article on town meeting warrant, to be able to fund those additional teachers. New slide, please, Ben. And as I do every year, I like to point out that, here in Hopkinton, people really are getting an awful lot for their money. If you take a look at this slide here that has the 2017 per pupil expenditures, and this is how it's reported out through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. At that town, among a group of communities that were selected either because they are like us or proximal to us, or communities that we think are also running very good programs, we were ranked 24th there, and our per pupil expenditure at that time was $14,557. New slide, please. And then if you take a look at where we are in 2019, which is the latest data offered to us by DESE, you can see that we're no longer at 24, but we are at 31 with a per pupil expenditure of $15,086 per student. The state average is at $17,149. So we are certainly below state average in what we're spending on each one of our students. Next slide, please. But you can also see where we fall in some of Massachusetts rankings. If you take a look at the slide there, you can see that Niche has ranked Hopkinton 1 in 3 different categories. That would be the category of having the best teachers in Massachusetts, having one of the best places to teach in Massachusetts, and being the very best school district in Massachusetts. And if you can just move to the next slide. And you can also see that US News and World Report ranked Hopkinton High School as 3rd in the state of Massachusetts. We are 3rd behind an exam school and behind a charter school. So we really like to think that Hopkinton High School is the first ranked truly public school in all of Massachusetts. So again, a conservative budget. Certainly, we are doing a whole lot with Hopkinton tax dollars, and we are very proud of our rankings and of our administrators, our faculty, our staff, and all of the people who are working to make this magic happen. And now I will ask Mrs. Rothermick to kind of go through some of those slides so that you can see how these dollars are spent.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So beginning with the FY21 operating budget of 51 million, you can see the salary increase of a little over 2 million and an expense increase of 615,000. The total requested increase is 5.4% or 53,966,911. Next slide. So again, this is just a typical visual that the school budget is really salary driven. And this is the typical division, if you will, salary at 80% and expenses at 19%. Next slide. Just another visual looking at this by educational program. You can see obviously regular education costs at 54.8%. Then followed by student services, which again is district-wide. And then you can see where the other buckets are: transportation, central office, building and grounds, technology, and athletics. Next slide. And again, just breaking it down by cost center. And the reason you focus on this is you look at your 3 elementary schools, and they're all around that same percentage in the 7% in terms of cost. So you're really looking for that equity. Then as students matriculate through the district, middle school is a little more expensive to educate a student. And when you get to high school, it is more expensive as well. Going over to the other side, again, student services, that is a district-wide cost. So that is taking care of kids pre-K through high school. Next slide. So breaking it down, focusing on salaries. Contractual increases represent 2.9% of salaries, and staff increases of staff requests, I apologize, 959,000. Next slide. So drilling down into what is that total increase for the salaries again, contractual increases of 1.1 million. Staff requests in special education of 277,000. The instructional cost and enrollment growth requests in 362,000. Instructional program enhancements at 130,000. And administrative support and facility enhancement requests at 188,000. And you can see what those FTEs represent in each of those buckets. Next slide. Drilling that down, student services, the 7.4 FTEs, it's a 0.5 FTE for teaching, 4.1 for paraprofessionals, a 1.0 BCBA, a 0.4 occupational therapy, 1.2 in nursing, and 0.2 support. For instructional cost and enrollment growth of 5.4 FTEs, Elmwood is 2.4 FTE, and then 1.0 FTE each for middle school, high school, and English as a second language teaching. And if you recall back to that slide that Dr. Kavanaugh showed earlier in terms of the growth of students, that 5.4 FTEs does represent about what the increase projection would be. Instructional program enhancements, Elmwood 1.0 FTE for an adjustment counselor and a 0.6 math coach for K-5. Administrative support facility enhancements is a 1.0 each for technology, a custodian, administrative support, and a general ed paraprofessional, and a 0.2 for the HR department. Next slide. Looking at just expenses of 615,000 increase for next year, and that's 6.2% increase just in the expense bucket. Next slide. Again, just that visual of what you're looking at, student services and transportation and building and grounds. You know, you're really looking at what are non-discretional spending when you're looking at these larger buckets. Next slide. So again, look, using those same buckets, contractual inflation, current services is the increase is 231,000. Special education of 42,000. Instructional cost, enrollment growth, and the replacement cycle of 333,000. And administrative support and facility enhancements at 8,000 for that total 615,000 increase. Next slide. Drilling down further, contractual inflation and current services is representative of transportation, central office, athletics, and building and grounds. Student services is the transportation and contracted service. Instructional cost, enrollment, and replacement cycles is within regular education, technology, and vocational tuition. And the administrative support and facility enhancements, actually that's only central office. We took out building and grounds, which actually represented PPE, which we have withdrawn. So that is an error in my slide, I apologize. Next slide. So looking at the detail, transportation, there's a contractual increase of 47,000 and also a loss of the offset of our bus fee revenue since have not been collecting bus fees with the hybrid model and many other issues last year with refunds. Building and grounds, again, the increase is really just the loss of being able to use our building use as a revenue offset. Central office, 66,000 increase in legal to represent our actual costs, and that's offset by a one-time prior year budget item. Athletics, 6,000 in transportation, 4,000 in officials. Those are contractual or set by the MIAA. And 9,000 in supplies that were reduced due to the cut of spring sports from last year. Next slide. Student services, 26,000 increase for transportation and 20,000 increase in contractual services. Technology is 136 for the Chromebook replacement cycle for both the middle school and the teachers at the high school. 129,000 of software, some of which is new, such as Zoom, Panopto, and Schoology, and some are driven by enrollment increases, Power School, Renaissance Learning as some examples. But that is also offset by a 73,000 one-time purchase from last year's budget. Regular education is mostly textbooks for the middle school, the high school, and curriculum. And that's offset by some minor elementary school decreases. And vocational tuitions, that is driven by student enrollment. Next slide. Administrative support and facility enhancements for central office. This is software to manage the smart student IDs that were instituted this year and enhancing our bus navigation software. Next slide. So again, using those same buckets, this is taking both salary and expense and putting them together for the total consolidated budget. So the contractual inflation and current services for both salary and expense of 1.4 million, special education at 319,000, the instructional cost and enrollment growth at 695,000, the instructional program enhancements at 130,000, and the administrative support and facility enhancements at 196,000. For the total budget request of 53,966,911. Next slide. And that's it for questions.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. Board members?
Ben, you can stop share, I think. Thank you. I believe it's Ben that's doing that, so I appreciate him saying that out loud, but.
Yep, Ben's running it. Board members, anything for Susan or Dr. Kavanaugh?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
how about on the social and emotional well-being line item? I didn't really see one in there per se, but you know, the kids are under a lot of stress these days, obviously, as is the rest of us. But most important, I think we got to try and look at their social and emotional well-being. How about additional spending or needs that need to be filled in that regard?
So there are really two, I think, positions that would address those needs. One is at the Elmwood School. Mrs. Carver is requesting a 1.0 full-time adjustment counselor. And then we also have a 1.0 BCBA in there as well.
BCBA?
Board Certified Behavior Analyst. It's a person who kind of helps, works directly with some children to kind of help them with their behavior, but also works with teachers so that the goal is to keep a child into the classroom so that, you know, when they become dysregulated, we're not pulling them out, but the teacher also has strategies to help that child to behave. We really are anticipating that we're going to have some children who come back to school in September who have not done school since March 10th of 2020. And so our big fear is that, and maybe you've heard these stories from other districts that are just going back full time now, but kids, they don't know how to line up and they don't know how to sit in a chair, and they don't, just because they haven't done those things in a very, very long time. So, you know, I guess when we think about sort of the high school level, they do have adjustment counselors and lots of programs and guidance counselors and school psychologists, and the same thing in the middle school. But what we're seeing is that we really need to bolster those programs in our elementary schools.
Is Mr. Bishop satisfied with his staffing in the guidance department, would you say?
He did not ask us for any additional SEL guidance, that kind of staffing. He did ask for, is it 1.0 FTE, just, you know, to be able to distribute that person in kind of dribs and drabs. So if enrollment increases and you needed an extra 0.2 social studies, 0.2 English, 0.2 science, he could kind of delegate it that way, if that makes sense. The schedule at the high school is always so difficult because it's student generated. And so depending on the classes that kids want or the number of kids that you have, you may need to add in a particular year 0.4 French and take away 0.2 Spanish and then flip flop them, if that makes sense as well. So I think he's really looking with his 1.0 FTE at academics.
Okay, thank you.
So I have something, I don't know if it's for Susan or Dr. Kavanaugh. So with this year being as crazy as it is, with the transportation, I know that we have contracts with transportation, and I know that they've always come back and said, you know, price of fuel went up, so we have to go up. Have we gotten any rebates from or any type of money back from not utilizing them as much as they would have expected?
Yes, actually, we did renegotiate, if you will, our contract for the spring for days that we were not in session. We negotiated to cover a portion of the contract. And for this year, we have another negotiated because we are in session. However, on days where we have gone remote, we do pay a reduced rate. So we do have some of those flexibilities. Thankfully, we have not gone remote for long periods of time. Had we done that, there were stipulations about whether or not drivers would go on unemployment and we would pay even less. But when we did go remote for a couple of days, we did pay a reduced rate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had a question about the software. I noticed you mentioned the increase in an expense for Zoom, which I know can be very expensive if you have to get a license for every teacher. Are we expecting that that could be reduced in the fall? It seems like not every teacher would need Zoom if we go back to the full time in the fall.
I'll let Carol speak to that. Go ahead.
I suppose that it could be, but we really did want to budget for all contingencies there. Yeah, and hopefully, I have my fingers crossed that we're not going to be on Zoom in the fall and that all of our kids will be back. But you know, even this year, I can't tell you the number of times that you'll have people who are sitting in adjacent offices, but they will use Zoom in an effort to meet, just so that they are not, you know, two people in a small space. So, yeah, I mean, it's been an amazingly useful tool, and hopefully that price can be brought down a little bit, but we want to make sure that in the event that we do need it, we have it.
Right. So you have wiggle room if that is not needed later. You can save some money in the fall.
Yes, we always can do that.
Good. Well, thank you guys very much. We appreciate your time. Mr. Kamalu.
So it just, if the board wishes, we do have the capital slides. I didn't know if you wanted us to run through those as well. That's up to the board.
Sure, I'd say that's appropriate. Everybody else has been doing it, so jump on.
Okay, I'll try to run through these as quickly as I can. Ben, if you could project those as well.
Apparently there are none. Townspeople appreciate that.
Big save.
Through the chair, I am having an issue bringing the slides up. If you would give me a moment.
I would. We can always circle back if there's going to be a delay. Ben, should we jump to somebody else until you can get that squared away?
Through the chair, I have them right here. 1 second.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you, Ben. If you could just go to the next slide. So this represents the full capital request that the school committee approved and put forward. HVAC district-wide, a boiler replacement project, roof replacement, a vehicle for building and grounds, system-wide security upgrades, system-wide technology upgrades, a district-wide planning study, the White House exterior renovation, the wetlands order of condition, and the marathon addition. Next slide. So the HVAC district-wide, this will be a continuation of installing direct digital controls, and this will be at the middle school, and this will hit on 20 of the largest heating coils to give control to our building management system. Next slide. Boiler replacement, this is also at the middle school. And this cost and the structure came from an engineering design and engineering study that we put together. And the recommendation is to replace these 2 larger units with 3 smaller ones. It's more cost or less cost and more efficient. There was a request in FY20. Originally, we thought we would cycle through the boilers one at a time. But the original request was not sufficient to do the full project. And in looking at it, it made more sense to actually go to the 3. Next slide. The roof replacement project is a partial replacement at the Hopkins School in the middle school. You can see the areas that were photographed by the engineering study that was done. Next slide. So for the Hopkins Elementary, the replacement will be the green sections, and the purple section is actually just up for repair. In the blue, you can see the age of that roof is 2016, so that will put the Hopkins roofs in a very good light for the number of years moving forward. Next slide. The middle school, again, the green are the areas to be replaced. And just to be clear, that is not the area where there are solar panels. The blue at the top of the slide, that was replaced with insurance that blew off during a storm, actually. Next slide. The vehicle, this would represent adding to the maintenance staff. There's currently 3 trucks for 8 staff. The vehicles are used for multi-purpose around the district, and it will improve the efficiency by having more vehicles for our 8 staff members. Next slide. System-wide security upgrades. This is the final year of the new camera installs throughout the district, and that was outlined by the Security Task Force Technology Assessment Plan that was done a number of years ago. Next slide. Technology upgrades represents the data center firewall and software and the Bell system. The firewall obviously keeps the network safe, and the Bell system, it will move it so that it is controlled in-house, if you will. Right now, we need to call a vendor in every time we need to change a bell or move something around. Next slide. The district planning study, you'll see this is a consistent discussion in terms of enrollment. So we'll be looking at our enrollment projections, the MSBA space guidelines, grade configurations, and discussion groups to determine a long-term strategy for enrollment growth in all of our fiscal plans. Next slide. The White House exterior renovation. This would represent the roof and siding. Originally, this 200,000 also included the windows and doors. However, we've been able to do that with other money. So this request actually has been cut in half. And again, the building right now is currently used for the 18 to 22 special education program, and there are also offices in there. Next slide. The wetlands order of condition is an amount from the original high school fields that were built. The full cost to do the wetlands order of conditions is 100,000. So what was allocated in the past was 40. So this would 60,000 would be to get to that final 100,000 and close out this old order of conditions. Next slide. And the last one is in addition to the Marathon School. Already the Marathon School has repurposed several rooms. The health room is now a preschool room. The art room is a first grade classroom. The PLC room is the ESOL and adult workspace. And the family resource room is slated to become an instructional classroom for next year. This construction would add 4 classrooms at the end of the wing, 2 on each floor with a stair tower. Next slide. So as you can see, and of course, this is also with COVID going on, but we are already really being creative with space. Students are being worked with in hallways, teachers are working in storage areas, and on it goes, really utilizing every inch that there is. Next slide. So when the Marathon School was built, there were two locations that were identified as potential areas of expansion if needed. The arrow on the side of the snapshot is the area where we would look to do that 4 classroom addition. There is another spot where you could do 2 additional, and that's the arrow that's at the top of the slide that goes out towards the playground area. But right now we are focusing on the arrow on the side, which would be where we would look to do this addition. Next slide. So this is pretty much the same idea, the area that has been identified. It would represent 2 kindergarten classrooms and 2 first grade classrooms, total of 4,300 square feet. Next slide. Just to remind everybody what we have done in this last year, at the Elmwood School, we have added 4 classrooms with the modulars for 3,600 square feet. At Hopkins, also 4 additional classrooms for the same amount of square feet. The high school, we're in progress for 6 classrooms at 7,700 square feet, which includes storage space. And this new request would be 4 classrooms at Marathon School for 4,300 square feet. And it is higher in square footage than Elmwood and Hopkins. Your K classrooms include a toilet as a standard classroom. Next slide. Again, looking at our enrollment, the current kindergarten class size is 270. Next slide. And that's it. Running through quickly.
Susan,
And you could stop sharing if the board has questions.
Susan, you may not have it in front of you tonight, that's fine, but could you get from Tim the total number of square feet that's going to be redone for that $3 million, please?
For the Marathon building?
For the roof repair district-wide, I think it was a couple
Oh, for the
different
roof.
buildings. Yeah,
Okay.
roof repair district-wide. How many square feet is being looked at for that $3 million number?
I could get that answer for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question. Did we look at the modular classrooms for Marathon School? And is there any savings in doing the modular as opposed to what we're doing?
So when you look at the cost of doing the modulars and you look at the cost of doing the stick-built for Marathon, it is roughly the same. The thing to keep in mind is the Marathon School was built as an early learning center. So it will always stay a grade K1 configuration. You have, kindergarten classrooms, as I said, those are built with toilets. You have teeny tiny fixtures throughout in all the restroom areas. But when you look at your 2 through 12 schools, your grade configurations potentially, when we look at that district-wide study, could change. So the modulars that are at both Elmwood and Hopkins give us the flexibility of looking at our grade configurations before we would ever do a stick built. So for the same amount of money, it makes sense to stick built onto the school that is not going to change.
And then one other question was, while we're at it, if we're already going to be doing an addition, do we have space to go bigger to accommodate future growth?
Yeah, as I said, we do have that area identified where you could put 2 additional classrooms. We do have areas identified to do 6 classrooms there.
No, but so the addition on the side of the building, that you couldn't go further out and add 6 or 8?
You run into the wetlands buffer.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of our schools are surrounded by wetlands.
Mhm.
So that's why it's very important when we build them to identify areas where we could expand. And so when this building was built, those were the areas that were identified without getting into the wetlands and everything else.
But it's just the buffer zone that you'd be encroaching on, right?
I'm not sure if it's the buffer zone. You may actually be in the wetlands. If you go down
Okay.
Hayden Row, so if you're on the Marathon property, around the building is kind of that emergency access road.
Mhm.
Right on the other side of that, down in that hill, are wetlands. So you are very close. And I won't speak to know exactly what the regulations are as to buffer
Mhm.
zone or in it, but you're very close.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan, how do we know, has it gone out to bid? How do we know what the cost is for 4 classrooms? Are we just estimating it, ballparking it?
It is an estimate, yes. So using the estimates, DRA was the architect engineer for the original Marathon building construction. So they're using roughly what the square footage per, cost per square foot for that building and adjusting for inflation.
Okay.
Yeah, you would have to do a full engineering before you could get a true bid cost.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thank you guys very much. I think we're all done. Got out of that relatively clean. Have a good night, Mr. Kamalu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh and Carol. Through the chair, next is Jane Moran, the chair of the Upper Charles Trail Committee.
It should be on.
Yeah, you're on, Jane.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kamalo. So just a brief overall of our charge as a committee. We was just a reminder, I'm sure you know, we were created by the select board back in 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. And we were charged with building, designing, constructing, and engineering a Class 5 trail system, which is a multi-use trail system similar to the one that Milford has, from the Milford parking lot through East Hopkinton to connect to Hopkinton State Park in Ashland. And that's a requirement of qualifying for all of these grants that we're getting. So if you look at our budget of $52,300, I just want to first remind the board that a lot of this money is rollover from year to year because we set our expectations of what we feel we need to do during the year to meet our goal of getting this done under, 10, 12 years or whatever it is. And sometimes we're more successful than others only because of land acquisitions that may or may not come true. We continue to research and speak with a lot of property owners. And our overall goal is to work with as much town property that we have. But there are some instances where we have to, as a town, talk with a property owner to see if they would be willing to purchase property or not. So we continue to work with multiple, property owners in Hopkinton to get that goal done. So at this point, I would just like to thank both Norman and Elaine for their guidance and their flexibility in assisting our Trails Committee with their expertise, and also Dave Del Tario this year, who has helped us immensely as a project manager for the school campus connector project that we're working on. And also to Ben, who you've seen a lot of his work, for helping us and assisting us with grants. As I mentioned before, we try and apply for as many grants as possible. But in order to get the grants, we have to do some pre-feasibility studies, and that gets us to the point where we can then apply for these grants and get this money from state funds. So we have identified as a committee multiple pre-feasibility studies that we would like to pursue this year, and that's 4 different studies that we would like to see be accomplished in 2022 fiscal year budget. To that end, we just don't know how it's going to play out as we continue to aggressively research all of these different various obstacles. So that's the bulk of our budget. The rest of it are miscellaneous operating budgets that we have to use for various memorandum of understandings to get easements through various larger property owners who don't want to sell us or don't want to give us a piece, but we're able to negotiate easement language to get through someplace like Milford Water Company or Tennessee Gas and other property owners that are willing to work with us or entertain that. So, and then some minor funding for operating expenses like, photocopying at various options. Staples, sometimes we need large poster boards, things like that. So with that very brief summary, we're willing, and I also Barry Rosenblum, our committee treasurer, is on the line if you have very specific questions that you want to ask about some of the line items. But with that, we're willing to take questions or answer any of your concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Jane. Board members? You're getting off scot-free as well, Jane. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank you for all of your support. It's been a wonderful year, and we continue to grow and learn as we go through this journey together.
All right. I want to thank you for thanking us for your support. So take care. Mr. Kamalu.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Jane Moran, thank you so much for the great work that you are doing with the Upper Charles Trails Committee. I can tell you that Dave, Elaine, and I are really enjoying the work that you're doing alongside us. With your permission, Mr. Chair, next is Peter Lagoy. He is the chair of the Trail Coordination and Management Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Kamalo. Mr. Lagoy.
Hello. So Peter Lagoy, Chairman of the Trail Coordination and Management Committee. Our budget for fiscal year 2022 is estimated at $25,000. That is comprised of about $2,000 for general maintenance of trails, mowing on some of the trails that are grass covered, cutting logs that fall over time. About $8,000 is for parking areas. Parking has been identified by folks who are using the trails, including the Chuck Joseph of the Growth Study Committee, as a need. We have great trails, but sometimes there's no parking. So we've identified about $8,000 for additional parking or improving parking. We have about $3,000 for signage, and that includes both trailhead signs, which again are lacking right now, and also for signs within the trails. We have a goal of making sure that within trails, you should be able to see 2 sign markers from any point on the trail. Folks in town aren't particularly used to getting out in the woods, and we want to make sure people feel comfortable getting out in the woods. We have about $6,000 budgeted for appraisals and A&R, and that really isn't for a specific project, but what we've seen over this past year is that we've had need for purchasing either property or purchasing easements and the costs associated with that. So that's what that $6,000 is for. And finally, we have about $6,000 budgeted for bridges and boardwalks. A lot of the trails cross over streams, and we need to build bridges over those streams. Some of the areas are somewhat wet, and again, to improve those trails and to increase their use, we need to put some money into doing boardwalks in those wetter areas. So total budget is about $25,000. We had a slightly higher budget last year. We haven't used all that money because obviously 2020 was a little odd in terms of trying to get out and do work, but we think the $25,000 is a good number for 2022. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your time. Board members, anything from Mr. Lagoy?
Just a quick one on the parking at trailheads. Are we looking at expanding parking, or how are we planning on improving that?
It's a combination. So for example, there's a lot of use at the Pratt Pond area. So if you're on Fruit Street, where the new Pratt property is, there's some parking that could go in there. We understand that there's parking being looked at as part of the CSA, but I think that whole area needs parking kind of sooner rather than later. Echo Trail, for example, would be an addition. We've got 4 spots in there. That's been overused. This summer, that was at capacity or over capacity much of the time. So we could add some additional spots there. And College Rock could just be improved. So it's kind of a mix of things.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually thinking specifically of College Rock and kind of improving that. I know I've bottomed out plenty of times there.
Right. Yeah, and they're fairly simple fixes, but they need to be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you need to buy a bigger electric car, Mr. Nasrullah.
Well, that's actually my wife's car.
Great. Looks like we are good. Thank you, Mr. Lagoy. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, all.
Appreciate all that
Take
you do.
care.
Mr. Kamalu, Town Manager report.
Yeah, in fact, Mr. Chair, I also want to echo your thank you note to Mr. Peter Lagoy. Every time we get a phone call from Peter here in the office, there's one phrase that comes to mind, boots and hands on the ground. He's a doer. They're always doing good work on our trails. Thank you, Peter, and your team. 3 quick updates for the board. In terms of the FY22 budget process, I think the board has a good sense as to where you are in hearing from the various town departments. Today was our last grouping, and therefore at the next select board meeting, we'll be looking at the board taking its final position on the budget and perhaps forwarding it to the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee has already started its reviews together also with the CIC. I believe they are at the tail end of their reviews. CPC is waiting for its last meeting on the CPC projects. And so things are moving forward very, very smoothly in terms of the FY22 budget. There are 2 things that we're continuing to monitor. First, we are monitoring the evolving budget picture at the federal level with new federal legislation that might provide support for some of the needs that are identified in the town's FY22 budget. As we've done in other years, in past years, we're also looking and monitoring at the extent to which the state might be able to provide the amount of local aid the governor has earmarked for the town in the state H1 budget proposal. Main Street website is up. Traffic on the website is pretty significant. A significant number as of Friday with about 145 people who had subscribed to receive construction updates on the project. In relation to the construction process, this afternoon I received a request from Dave Del Torio. I believe Dave is still here with us. A request coming from the contractor to see if they could use at several times during construction portions of Marathon Way as a staging area for the project.
Thank you. Do you need us to talk about that, or?
Yes, I'm interested in getting you the board's feedback on that proposal. Again, the idea here being we want to reduce the time that the contractors are driving up and down across town, bringing equipment and materials. And then also secondly, we also want to stay away from taking up any portions of Main Street in front of the main business areas. And then thirdly, we believe in the past the town has used Marathon Way for those purposes.
Okay, board members, anything to?
So we're just going to be parking there, or we're storing materials there?
It could be both. It could be both. Yeah.
Just as so basically a staging area.
Yep.
And for how long a period of time?
It's intermittently throughout the construction phase of the project, but also knowing fully well that come winter, there's no more, there won't be any construction, so it will be available to the public.
It's just such a picturesque area. I kind of hate to see stuff taking up so much space. I don't know if behind Sutter School would be a better choice.
Norman?
Go ahead, Dave, through the chair. Yeah.
The when I was being rejoined as a participant, I didn't hear everything you said, but I just wanted to add, allowing the contractor to store his materials and his equipment there. If you do a kind of a deep dive into that, it might actually equal about an extra half a day of work that they will be able to perform weekly, because they have to drive their big excavators from wherever they're storing them to the site every day. The closer we allow them to put materials like not dirt, they won't put any fill material on the roads, but they'll put like some of the pipe and some of the catch basin structures you've probably seen on any roadway project, kind of sitting on the side of the road. They put it there so that they can, first thing in the morning, they'll pull the plate and they'll start setting those structures. It's really an advantageous way for the town to really get this project done as fast as possible, allowing them to use that location.
But to Amy's point, how about the area behind Center School?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Park and Recs runs programs through the summer. They use the parking lot, so I'd be concerned with some of the traffic going through that area. Just as if we don't really want to allow them to park, anywhere in Hayden Row or Ash Street or any of the surrounding areas. It's just Marathon Way's kind of really it's a wide area there. And it'll really, I think Eversource Gas had used that when they were doing the East Main project. It just really speeds up the construction process for the contractor.
I guess I'm wondering, do you need an answer tonight, or could we decide at our next meeting? I just don't want to get a ton of emails from people that are upset about it without having a chance to think about it. Has Parks and Rec weighed in?
It's not the common. It's a roadway.
I know, but then it prevents people from parking there too.
I think, the bottom line is come March 15th or 20th, whenever it is, they're going to start tearing the place up. It's not going to be a very pretty place to look for the next year or so. Hopefully they can get it done this year. So, construction is construction. I'm in the construction business, been doing it for 35 years. There's going to be some pain in this process. There's no way to avoid it. If allowing them to stage there increases their productivity and gets this done faster, we'll get the ugliness gone quicker if we allow them to do this. It's very common in any construction project across Massachusetts that there will be roadway pipe and there will be machinery and other things stored right in the right of way along these sites. So I would encourage us to consider allowing it. We can't go to the public every time we need to make a decision about this project. That is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. The decision's been made at town meeting, build it. So if we start sort of hemming and hawing I think we're going to open up a big can of worms for ourselves. It's only going to delay the ugliness of it. It's going to be ugly. To think that it's not going to be ugly for the 6 months that's torn up, it really doesn't. We just have to get past that. I would encourage us to make a decision this evening.
So to Mr. Herr's point, I see both points. I see Ms. Ritterbush's and Mr. Herr. I don't see a reason why we would have to use Center School or Marathon Way for the crux of the for the entirety of the project. I think we have other places that we can store things. So I would say, so if we are going to use if we do make a decision that we will use Marathon Way, I would say that we should probably allow that up until they get past Church Street. Once they get past Church Street, I think we should utilize like the area behind Carrigan Park, where they did that before, off of Marshall Ave. There is, that is off the beaten path. And I think logistically, distance-wise, having worked in construction for a little bit, not like Mr. Herr, actually with work boots and gloves, I would say that logistically, it would be just as easy to bring a lift of 8-inch pipe from Carrigan to the center of town to the intersection from Carrigan as it would from Marathon Way. It also would be tucked away a little bit. Only concern I have is if they start doing midnight, working at midnight, that is, I will be one of those people that it's in my backyard and literally, not literally, but figuratively. And I probably would not want to hear excavation going on in my backyard at 2 a.m. But I wouldn't have a problem, if we determined a distance of how far Marathon. I wouldn't want to use Marathon Way to stage it the whole time. It just wouldn't make sense. So I think that, to Mr. Herr's point, yeah, I do think it is not going to be pristine, and as long as I have no problem with them storing, pallets of pipes and building materials and things like that on there, as long as it doesn't encroach on the granite curbing, it doesn't encroach on the common itself. Like you said, if it is simply on the roadway, I'm good with that. If it's they're going to start storing stone dust, and now that stone dust is going to spill over the granite curb onto the common that we've done so much work on, I would have a problem with that. But if it's strictly building materials, neatly stacked there, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
How about if it was, because I'm pretty sure, and Dave can correct me on this, I'm pretty sure one of the phases of the project, in fact, the first phase that they're going to work on is from the intersection up the hill to the Doughboy statue or wherever the project ends. So that's one segment. And then after they complete that segment, then they would have to go down further to behind Carrigan Park. Would that work for you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
It's not Mr. Chair that it works for. I need to see if it works for the town.
Right. No, I'd add on top of, the contractor really is, he's committed to starting the first crew near East Main Street, Ash Street. Very soon after, they want to bring on a second crew that might start on the other end of the project, so that they'd be able to utilize Marshall Street. And if he has enough laydown area and storage space, and it wouldn't be, there'd be no fill material that they store anywhere. That would all come in daily with their dumps. They might bring a third crew in if they have enough area where it makes it, cost efficient for them as well. Instead of bringing stuff, their original location was the snow dump, so that's kind of far away. There's no way, he said, he could get 3 crews starting here. So I think if we really had 3 crews starting here, we'd really look at some progress a lot quicker than anticipated. So. And we were looking at Marshall Street, Mr. Tedstone. I just hadn't fully vetted that with Park and Recs yet. I had talked to the director, and I was going to kind of ask their opinion of it as that as well, and then ask the board here.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess,
I mean, I think I'm fine with it. If as Mr. Herr said, we're going to be in construction and it's going to be ugly and it's going to be inconvenient. And that's just the reality of it. So, do our best to keep things livable. But yeah, if it's going to expedite the process, I'm all for it.
Yep.
How about public safety, Mr. Kamalo and Dave? I assume they're okay with this. I mean, we shut it down fairly regularly for different events in town and so on. But, it does change the traffic flow when you have to go down and take that right or coming out on the main street from Ash Street. But I assume public safety is okay with this idea?
I haven't fully run it through them yet. There was some consideration, would we put a fence up around everything? The contractor offered to do that. Maybe similar to like the library where they actually had fence up the whole time. They actually put the plastic up so you can't see through the chain link fence. I'm not sure that's a good option with this route, where you can still see through the chain link fence, or just not use the chain link fence at all and stack it neatly. I'll follow up with public safety with the two chiefs.
Yeah, I would want to make sure they're okay with it. I assume they will be, but we should check with them because it is a right of way and folks do use it with their cars and so forth. So, Mr. Chair, I would move that the select board approve using the use of Marathon Way for laydown area intermittently as required for the project until such time that the work east of the main intersection is completed.
Second that.
Discussion?
Yeah, I had a question. I know that they're going to be taking out the grass pat in front of the common, and they're going to be working on the end of the common and adding to the grassy area in places. So that area is going to be all dug up at some point in time anyway, isn't it? I mean, as part of the construction project, when I looked at the plans, it looks like there's going to be a lot of work done on Marathon Way. It will be closed anyway.
Yeah, while they're doing, you're exactly right. Yes.
So it would be a good place to put things and to keep it closed off.
We certainly should ask for a fence along the common side where it's not going to be disturbed, right? So we know that the Doughboys, that's going to change to Mary Jo's point, but on the common itself, on that corner, going around towards Center School, a lot of that's staying as is today, correct? So that should be safety fenced off, I think, as part of this startup anyway.
The green strip in front of the common is coming away too. It's going to be the old wall.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's all coming up too. So, there's going to be a lot of work done on Marathon Way. So it's going to be closed anyway.
Okay.
Mr. Del Torio, be forewarned, if anything happens to my cookies corner, I will be in your office and we will be having at least a discussion. That is sacred ground over there, my friend.
A historic district got them to agree they're going to remove it, save the monument very safely and store it somewhere and then put it back, correct?
Yes, correct.
If you want, you can store it at my house. I will polish it nightly. That guy is a god in my eyes. I'm more than happy to store it here if you need. And a locking.
Okay.
Take you up on the offer.
I think it's a really good discussion we're having tonight because this is starting something that Hopkinton hasn't done in a very long time, which is really disrupt the flow of what's going to happen in the center of town. This is the start of it for a couple of years. And I think us being nimble and working with the contractor is only going to help the process, but I think it's healthy for all of us to understand, here we go. Like we're on here and it is going to be difficult. And to the point about, I know, Amy, you're concerned about getting some emails. We're going to get emails. That's okay. The job is to read them, either forward them or delete them or do something with them. But it's, that's not, we can't get into a lot of dialogue about this project. We had a lot of dialogue about this project. And so we just got to proceed. But I do think this is a healthy conversation so that the town understands the game on here.
To your point, Mr. Herr, I don't know if you follow national elections. We don't delete emails, we archive them.
Whatever.
Okay.
They're all in the server. I don't have to worry about it.
We'll see, Hillary. Mr. Kamalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last but not least, friendly reminder, the all
You gotta take a vote, Brandon. You didn't take a vote.
Oh,
Was it seconded?
Yes.
Yes.
I was asking Mr. Kamalo if it was seconded. There was no reason for him to jump ahead of me.
Yeah, right.
Any further discussion? We already covered that. Mr. Nasrullah, how do you vote?
Nasrullah, yes.
I'm mad at you, Mr. Hurst. So Ms. Lafreniere, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Ms. Ritterbusch?
Yep, I'm voting yes, just on the condition that Dave's going to talk to public safety and Parks and Rec coordinators.
And I vote yes. And, oh, Mr. Hurst?
And I vote yes.
All right, great.
Can I add, I just thought of this while we were speaking. There's only 145 people subscribed to the emails. Have we thought about using the blinking signs outside of the fire station to just say sign up at hopkintonma.gov, or because as people are driving by, they're going to see that and remember to sign up for the emails when they get home.
I don't mind using that sign for now.
Right, not forever.
Once we start needing the signs for signs, I would say the responsibility, it's been pretty well advertised and talked about. I would say the responsibility is on our citizens to log in and figure out how to do that. But yeah, while the signs are dormant, I don't mind doing that as long as it doesn't cause problems with public safety. Mr. Kamalo, moving on.
finally, on the town manager's report, a friendly reminder that the all hands meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at that meeting.
One of my favorite meetings of the week. All right, that's it, Mr. Kamala?
That's it.
Thank you. Liaison reports, board invites, board members, anyone?
I did meet at a Zoom meeting with the Sustainable Green Committee, and they've got a lot on their plate. And they wanted to do something on recycled furniture on Earth Day from to noon, just in the morning from like 8 to noon, somewhere in town. And that's in the planning process. They've got to check on the COVID and if they can do it. But there is a company in Holliston that will bring the big box and pick it up and have somebody there all day long to make sure that there's no trash, rubbish, or any problems. And I'm sure they would go by COVID restrictions, but that's what they're working on at the moment. And that's what they asked me to find out about. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Good.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move to adjourn the meeting.
Negative. Future board agenda items.
Oh,
Let's see. Mr. Nasrullah,
none.
Mr. Herr, Ms. Lafreniere, Ms. Ritterbusch.
You probably saw, but we got an email from the Girl Scouts today. They have several girls earning the gold award, so they would like to get on a future agenda.
Yep, I think that's great. We should definitely get them next. It would be nice to have a couple of feel-good things on some of these miserable agendas that we've been going through. So those are always nice. And I have none. So Mr. Nasrullah, if you would, please.
So I would like to renew my motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Nasrullah, how would you like to vote on that?
Nasrullah, yes.
To her.
Her, yes.
Lafreniere.
Frenier, yes.
Ritterbusch.
Ritterbusch, yes.
Redstone, yes. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.